The Starship Enterprise is filled with love stories in Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, but all of them must end before the events of Star Trek, the original series. The highly anticipated Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 3 premieres July 17 on Paramount+. Strange New Worlds Season 3 resumes the genre-bending intergalactic adventures, and many romances, of Captain Christopher Pike, Anson Mount, and the crew of the USS Enterprise. Star Trek, Strange New Worlds co-showrunners, Akiva Goldsman and Henry Alonso Myers, have referred to their series as love stories in outer space. While Strange New Worlds returns to the episodic format of Star Trek, the original series, the prequel's character arcs are serialized. Star Trek, Strange New Worlds characters evolve as the show progresses, growing, learning, sometimes dying in the case of Lieutenant Hemmer, Bruce Horak, and yes, falling in love. While Star Trek, Strange New Worlds has been liberally pairing up its attractive cast in various couples and triangles, these love stories can't last into Star Trek, the original series. Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, and his USS Enterprise crew do not have permanent romantic relationships, especially the Star Trek characters TOS shares with Strange New Worlds. As entertaining as Star Trek, Strange New Worlds romances are, they all, sadly, have a shelf life. 5. Lieutenant Lauren Noonien Singh and Lieutenant James T. Kirk. Lauren is never mentioned in Star Trek, the original series. Emotionally distant from her childhood trauma of surviving a Gorn abduction, Lieutenant Lauren Noonien Singh, Christina Chong, fell in love with an alternate reality Captain James T. Kirk, Paul Wesley, in Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 3, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Kirk died in Lauren's arms after being shot by a Romulan time agent named Sarah Adelaide Kane. Lauren quickly learned she is similarly attracted to Lieutenant James T. Kirk, her Jim's Prime timeline doppelganger. Lieutenants Kirk and Noonien Singh confess their mutual attraction in Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 9, Subspace Rhapsody. However, Kirk shot down pursuing a romance with Lauren because he has a girlfriend, Carol Marcus, who is pregnant. Even if Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Seasons 3 and 4 bring Kirk and Lauren's love story into full bloom, there is no future for them. Lauren is never mentioned in Star Trek, the original series since she was created for Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. 4. Lieutenant Spock and T'Pring. T'Pring and Spock have already taken a break. Perhaps Mr. Spock's, Leonard Nimoy, most famous episode of Star Trek, the original series is Season 2's Amok Time, which introduced his estranged fiancée, T'Pring, Arlene Martell. Utilizing the Vulcan ritual of Caliph Fi, T'Pring manipulates a divorce from Spock so she can marry a different Vulcan. Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 1 springs back nearly a decade to show Lieutenant Spock, Ethan Peck, and T'Pring, Gia Sandhu, in happier times, but this also didn't last. Spock's insecurities about not being Vulcan enough for T'Pring drove a wedge in their relationship even before the USS Enterprise's science officer acted on his growing feelings toward Nurse Christine Chapel, Jess Bush. In Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 5, Charades, T'Pring and Spock decided to take a break from their relationship. It's unclear if T'Pring will return in Strange New Worlds Season 3 or if this is it for Spock and T'Pring until they see each other again in Star Trek, the original series. 3. Lieutenant Spock and Nurse Christine Chapel. Chapel has unrequited love for Spock in Star Trek, the original series. Nurse Christine Chapel, Majel Barrett Roddenberry, had a famously unrequited love for Mr. Spock in Star Trek, the original series, but Star Trek, Strange New Worlds turned it on its ear, revealing that Chapel and Lieutenant Spock were a couple, albeit briefly. Christine and Spock were attracted to each other from the onset of Strange New Worlds, and it quickly grew into a full-blown romance, with Spock enjoying expressing his human side with Christine. In Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 2, Spock and Nurse Chapel became a couple, but it soon ended when Christine was accepted for a fellowship in archaeological medicine. Chapel chose her career ambitions and leaving the Starship Enterprise over Spock, and the Vulcan was heartbroken by their public breakup. Although Spock saved Chapel from the Gorn in Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 2's finale, their romantic status remains unclear. Regardless, Chapel has a different bow en route in Strange New Worlds Season 3. 2. Nurse Christine Chapel and Dr. Roger Corby. Corby and Chapel's engagement doesn't last. Dr. Roger Corby, Michael Strong, was introduced in Star Trek, the original series Season 1, Episode 9, What Are Little Girls Made Of? Described as the Louis Pasteur of archaeological medicine, Corby was also the former fiancé of Nurse Christine Chapel. Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 3 reintroduces Drive Roger Corby, Killian O'Sullivan, and will show his love story with Chapel that was long over in 1960s Star Trek. No matter how Nurse Chapel and Dr. Roger Corbis' love story plays out in Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, they do not marry or end up together. However, it will also be fascinating to see Chapel and Corby in love, and to see the details and circumstances of their relationship. How Corby and Chapel's engagement ends, and whether Spock plays a role in it, is something to watch for in Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 3, and possibly beyond. 1. Captain Christopher Pike and Captain Marie Battelle. Pike's destiny isn't happily ever after with Battelle. Captain Christopher Pike bucks the classic captain of the Enterprise mold by not being married to his starship. Since Star Trek, Strange New Worlds series premiere, Pike has been in a relationship with his peer, Captain Marie Battelle, Melanie Scrofano. Admirably, Pike and Battelle have weathered the challenges and distance of commanding their own starships to make their love story work. No matter how Nurse Chapel and Dr. Roger Corbis' love story plays out in Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, they do not marry or end up together. However, it will also be fascinating to see Chapel and Corby in love, and to see the details and circumstances of their relationship. How Corby and Chapel's engagement ends, and whether Spock plays a role in it, is something to watch for in Star Trek, Strange New Worlds Season 3, and possibly beyond. 1. Captain Christopher Pike and Captain Marie Battelle. Pike's destiny isn't happily ever after with Battelle. Captain Christopher Pike bucks the classic captain of the Enterprise mold by not being married to his starship. Since Star Trek, Strange New Worlds series premiere, Pike has been in a relationship with his peer, Captain Marie Battelle, Melanie Scrofano. Admirably, Pike and Battelle have weathered the challenges and distance of commanding their own starships to make their love story work.